to watch your path. I've literally watched you go from, taking over the world with Facebook ads, a masterful marketer, to watch what you're doing now it's really beautiful. And give us a bit of a backstory, because if I look at my journey, I'm very clear I got led to this place.
Sure.
Very clear.
Sure.
How did you land in this place from, you used to be a pastor, right? This is so cool. Pastor turned Facebook /online /meta marketer, serving the biggest people in the space, to now what you're doing. And everybody who's listening doesn't even know what you're doing now, because we haven't talked about that. So let's go right back to the transition to bring people where you are today to what you're doing today, because I think that's really important.
But seeing something in hindsight always is, oh, look at the dots connecting. But like when you're in it, you have
no clue.
No clue. Yeah. Where's a good place to start? Well, okay. This was probably 2016 now. Because of what we were doing on the meta ad side of it and building the business in the online world, we had the good fortune of being a part of some pretty great mastermind groups. And I'm assuming most people who are listening and or watching this know what that is. But I mean, there's a great collection of entrepreneurs doing some great things. And around 2016, I remember being in a particular mastermind group, and there were rumblings of this idea of psychedelic assisted therapy. And now keep in mind, I was a pastor for 14 years. The general sentiment, at least back then in the faith-based community that I was a part of, was you dare not touch a drug. That drug could be cannabis. That drug could be just it is the doorway to the devil, David. And don't ever go near. So remember, this is my upbringing. This is my context. On the other hand, I'm a part of these mastermind circles, and people are starting to talk about psychedelic assisted therapy and how it was changing their life, and 10 years of therapy handled in 10 hours. And I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. But again, my guards are up. I'm like, look at these crazies doing their crazy stuff. This is typical in our entrepreneurial circle. We're losing our shit here. But then again, a year passed, and I continued to go to various masterminds, and now it's 2017, and the rumblings are louder. And now it seems like part of some of these mastermind circles, we were bringing in experts, like a group called MAPS, for example, and people who are leading the charge on trying to understand what is truly the therapeutic benefit of these compounds as they affect people, particularly PTSD and veterans and first responders and all this kind of stuff. And so now, again, a year has passed, and more people are coming out and talking about this stuff. And my antennas are up a little bit, and I'm like, this is interesting, but what the hell is going on here? I'm being surrounded by people who are now having experiences and going all over the world and meeting with clinicians and all this kind of stuff. And so 2018, I remember being in Cabo, Mexico at a mastermind. This is Jason Gaynard's MMT. And one of the nights, because there was this rumbling and this buzz of people wanting to learn more, and there was Dr. Dan Engel there, who was one of the leading guys at the time in helping to lead the charge for MAPS and legalizing some of this stuff in the right context for people. And because there were rumblings, Jason just said, hey, you know what? After the costume party late at night, and remember, most of these entrepreneurs go to bed at 9:30 p.m. Like, we're early risers, early sleepers.
That's true.
The costume party that starts at 7 p.m. and is finished at 8:30, and everyone
with no booze.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, you know what? After the costume party, we're going to just have Dan go into one of the rooms, and anyone who just wants to do an open AMA Q&A with him is welcome to join. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to sit at the back. I'm going to go. And I remember walking in, it was probably 9:00. And I remember everyone saying the sentiment was there'd probably be like 12 or 13 people there. Anyways, 220 people showed up. Basically, everybody minus 4 people ended up in the room. That was underlying feeling that was going on, particularly with this group. At the end of the session, I got much more clarity. I had many more questions, but I got much more clarity. I basically left saying, you know what? I'm going to do this. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to do this. I think there's something worth exploring here. So Dr. Dan put me in touch with a facilitator. And I remember going home and telling my wife, and I couldn't tell my wife because remember, she has the same background as I. So I can't be like, babe, we're going to go see a doctor and he's going to give us some drugs and something's going to happen. I basically was like, okay, babe, we're going to do this thing together. I need you to trust me. Like it's remember the movie Limitless? Apparently it does stuff like, so we had our first facilitated clinical psychedelic experience at the time. This was now 2018.
And I think I want you to keep going on this, but I think distinguishing the compound that you used during each time is really important given the nature of your work, but also the variety that's available. So what was that?
So the first time was an MDMA, MDA combination in a clinic in Toronto. And again, we had heard there was a lot of clinical studies and going on with MDMA and PTSD and what that was doing for people and how it was working and that sort of thing. And so we felt like it was a good starting point and, all the stars aligned for this. So we go into this room and again, there's not much context here for my wife, at least. And I remember going in and meeting with the clinician and we're in separate rooms. He hands me like 2 pills and he says, swallow them. And he gives me earphones and an eye mask. And he says, put these on. There's a playlist, calibrated to this experience and just have a lie down. And of course, I don't know how much time is passing, but it felt like an hour. And I remember thinking, okay, like this ain't working. Like what are we doing here? And I remember I was going to just take off my stuff and turn politely to the clinician who was there and be like, yeah, I'm sure this does some great things for some people, but maybe not me. Maybe my brain's broken. I have no idea. And just as I'm about to do that, Hans Zimmer's Time, the song from Inception, goes on. And I'm like, oh, I recognize this song. And then, bloody hell, I guess the pill cracked in my belly and started going to my bloodstream. And I was like, whoa. And I felt just being down into the ground. And it was the beginning of, I guess, 4 or 5 or 6 hours. Now, keep in mind, my imagination of this was I was going to be having a conversation with the clinician about whatever comes up. Whatever this was took me so deep, and I didn't need anyone there because now I was working on myself, for goodness sake. And I remember distinctly a lot of stuff come up, but the 2 key things that were really holding me back at the time was I lost my father when I was 19 years old, and I couldn't fully reconcile that experience. It didn't connect to me why that had to happen. And I had made deals with God and I'm too young for this. And he's never going to meet his grandchild. Like I had a bunch of baggage around that. And then also, this is another part, like I went through a very ugly divorce where when I was a pastor of a church, my wife had extramarital affairs with leadership in my church and a whole bunch of other people. And in hindsight, it was one of the best things that could happen to me now seeing it. But in that moment, there was a lot of unresolved baggage. And for basically the 4 or 5 hours, I was just forgiving and loving and just working on these areas. And I came out feeling, I don't know, 100 pounds lighter and feeling more clarity than I had in God knows how long.
Yeah.
Now, in the other room, my wife didn't quite have the same experience. She said she remembered it hitting her and she felt like she was descending into an unending fall. And she was apparently yelling on the top of her lungs, like, Nick, what are you doing? You didn't tell me what's going on. Anyway, she had a beautiful experience after the fact, but it hit her by surprise. So for anyone watching or listening, make sure your wife or your partner is fully aware of what they're getting into before they get into it. But we both came to the same conclusion. There was something there that we had to explore further. Like, how could I have gone through my whole life carrying all this stuff and never being told? Well, I guess I was told, but like never being experienced how I could be free of this and how I can work on myself and how I could show up better and how there's a way out of not having to drag myself through life with these things, even if it was subtle on a very subconscious level. So I'll fast forward the story far quicker now. That then my personality is essentially when I go all into something, I go all in. It's 2 feet, I get naked and I jump in the ocean. Let's just go. So this is again, late 2018. For all of 2019, I basically went nonstop to any and every therapeutic psychedelic experience I could have. Now, I don't suggest that approach for anyone,
No.
by God. But at that moment, there was the wild, wild west. There was nobody to guide it. It's not like it is today where there's some regulations and some understandings. It was just, so I remember ending up in people's basements, for goodness sake, and all sorts of crazy places and having some really bad experiences along with some really good ones. But I started to just understand, what is this world about? And what does this mean? And so on and so forth. Then finally, about a year into it, I had a friend say, hey, I have this guy who comes over and he works with a particular molecule called the God molecule. Now, keep in mind, when I was doing this year-long binge effect, we had tried everything. So everything from ketamine to NN-DMT to multiple psilocybin experiences to San Pedro to ayahuasca, like just the gambit. Anything that I could get an experience of, I said yes to. And then we had someone call us and say, hey, I have this guy who comes to our home once a month to conduct these experiences with what was known as the God molecule. And I didn't know what that meant. I said, would you like to have an experience? And my default answer at the time was, yes, sure, why not? And so I had an experience with 5-MeO-DMT, aka the God molecule at the time. And now, having been through like a year and a half of all these various experiences, both good and bad, with different types of molecules and different types of facilitators, this was fundamentally different. And I didn't know it at the time, but I said, wow, there's something here that is just, I different. I got to figure this out. Why was this so different? What is about this? Et cetera, et cetera. Like one of the summary statements I used to say, and this is more clickbait. This is the old marketer coming out of me, David, so forgive me. But if I would ever write an article, it would be like, dude spent 14 years being a pastor looking for God and 10 minutes smoking 5-MeO-DMT found it. That would be my clickbait headline if I had to write one. Because it was a fundamentally different experience, which then led to us saying, okay, we're going to spend some extra time with this one. So we started getting mentorships in this area, and it kind of evolved into then people reaching out to us, knowing what we were doing and saying, hey, I don't know anything about this, but could you facilitate and hold space for me? And I'm like, I'm not comfortable doing that. But if you're a friend, we are getting training in psychedelic assisted therapy. We are getting mentored in this space. I mean, if you're comfortable full out knowing that, our situation and circumstance, yes, we'd love to hold space for you as a family or a friend. And I remember we did this with the help of our mentors the first couple times and just seeing lives start to change. And then there was just this weird background, calling might not be the right word, but something to say, this feels like where I can finally make a contribution to the world. I didn't know what it looked like and I didn't know how it was going to be, but I said, something to do with this is how I'm going to actually make a lasting contribution to the world, or at least my world, whatever that.
Of course, yeah.
The tail end of this story then goes, kept doing my marketing business, kept going on. And in late 2024, we brought on a marketing client who just so happened to be a 8-time Emmy Award winning filmmaker. And they made documentaries and they made short films and long films and all this kind of stuff and won a ton of awards. And they actually work with us to develop their marketing strategy for helping other filmmakers grow their business. And in true filmmaker fashion, they say, you know what, though, before we work together, I would love for you, Nick, to have a story finding call with one of our executive members, because this way we know more about you, you'll know more about us, and we'll be able to work together properly, which is one of their signature things. They always want to do story finding before they do anything. So by the end of that call, the executive goes back to the founder of the company and said, something weird about that Nick guy. We were supposed to be talking about marketing, but for an hour and a half, all he could talk about was like consciousness and presence and love and this other stuff that they're doing. I think you should talk to him about that. So I get on a call with the director and he's, hey, like, what is all this other stuff you're talking about? It seems like you're really passionate about it, not so passionate about the marketing stuff. What is all that? And so we got into it and he turns to me and he says, Nick, this seems like it's a story worth telling. Have you ever thought about potentially doing a documentary around it? And I said, hell no. That sounds A, too expensive, and B, way too much time. I don't have I don't have the money or the time to spend on a side project like this. But 3 months earlier, Farron, my wife, and I were doing a meditation. And what came to us was this concept or this idea that we now call unconditional openness. And the basic premise is this, that the world, the universe, nature, whatever you want to call it, is pretty good at figuring shit out, right? If you look at nature, it's sorted. You interject a human into it and then it gets messed up. But like nature's got itself worked out. The universe is orbiting in the exact same, like our own solar system doesn't require me to wake up in the morning and say some prayers or affirm or affirmations or visualizations to make sure the sun orbits the same way. It's worked out. There's an intelligence there that is extremely beautiful and way smarter than I. Yet most of us don't live our lives as though that were true. We think we're smarter than the universe and my agenda matters more and my preferences are important. So we set these contracts with the universe to say, I will be happy when you can meet all my criteria. So this contemplation meditation a couple of months prior said, Nick, if you truly believe that the universe has got it figured out and has got the right order, that means that if life unfolds a particular way and presents an opportunity to you, your default answer should be yes. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be yes, but your default response to how the world responds to you and unfolds before you, what if your answer was by default yes, where you're just unconditionally open to that which whatever comes before you? So that's the background. Then I have this conversation with this director, and I originally said, no, hell no, I'm not interested. And then I remembered the meditation and said, well, what if this is the universe and life is unfolding the way it is? And what if my default answer should be yes? Let's just explore that. So we said yes. This was now 2024, mid 2024. Long story short, we spent the last 18 months filming, and the film's about to come out, depending on when people are seeing this. But what happened was the creation of the film ended up being a forcing function for Farron and I to say, no longer can this be a side project for you. Yeah. No longer can it be something that you think you're just going to blissfully, funfully do just for fun and shits and giggles. Like, this is what everything you've been through has led you to for this moment. And so we decided to make some decisions about running down the marketing business, closing that off, and figuring out really what this means from that perspective. And that's where we're at right now. Now, there's a lot of detail and nuance there, but I should.
Yeah, there definitely is. But I think it's important for you to share who you are in the industry. And when I say the industry, it's online marketing, coaching. Sure. You know, you've been in this space for a very long time. You had a very successful business. I don't need, we're obviously not going to get into numbers. That's nobody's business, but you've done exceptionally well.
Sure.
And to go after the call, to listen to the metaphoric nudge, to no longer ignore the pull, to act on the meditation, to reflect when somebody makes an invitation to do a documentary, like that takes an extraordinary individual, and we all have that within us, but very few people ever pick up the phone.
Sure.
And you did. And your business beforehand, that was no joke. Like, you were working with the biggest people in the industry for their paid ads and marketing.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about that, how you've, bring us into the practical of what that transition is and has been like for you. Because the reason I really want to highlight this piece is there's so many people who are either doing what they love and they want to take it to a whole new level, or they're really successful at what they do, but they really want to go after something that makes a real impact. And that takes an immense amount of courage, among other things.
Yeah. Such a great, I mean, it's hard to put to words because there's so many things like intercolliding with one another at the same time. And what I mean by that is there's elements of that I didn't even know. I mean, I kind of knew, but when you're faced up again, like there's elements of identity, for example, where I had to be like, I'm only known for this. Like, who am I without this? If all I'm known for is this, then if I say I am not this anymore, who am I to the world? Who am I to my kids and my wife? Although I'm not a marketer to them, but who am I to them? Because this is what allows us to have the lifestyle we have. Who am I to myself? Because that's all I really ever knew for the last 25 years. And of course, we have these labels and the titles. I'm a father, I'm this, I'm that. This was my thing. On one element of this is my identity felt like it was being stripped away, because you have to ask the hard questions. If I am not this, and in fact, many of my experiences were that question. If you are not a father, if you are not a husband, if you are not this title or this label or this role you play, then who are you? That is a question most people avoid, because we don't want to know the answer. Oh, I feel comfortable in my title and my label. I am a husband. I'm a damn fucking good one too. And I'm a great father and I'm a great business owner and yah, 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 yah. And so there was that element of it. The other element of it was, and I know this sounds trite, I could walk through my life and say, I'm not really attached to the home that I live in or the house that I live in or the cars that I drive. And then when push came to shove, it's, oh, whoa, shit. I can hear it. You mean, wait, I can't live in my house no more? Like, not that I couldn't live in my house, but the potential of what if you can't? What if you can't afford it? Like, what if this step away means that? Are you okay with that? And there was a lot of like internal dialogue and work that had to happen there. And then, of course, what I'm really good at, David, is making up excuses. My default fear response is not fight, flight, or freeze. My default fear response is delay. So I'll come up with an excuse. Oh, not now. The timing's not perfect. Oh, I haven't built the influence or the audience in this space. Or, oh, maybe I should write a book first and maybe get the book out. And then if the book goes well, then I'm so good at like logistically and coming up with excuses to delay and it's a pattern I've recognized now, which is nice. It's if I'm delaying, it means there's just unresolved fear somewhere. And I just got to face that and nip it in the butt right out of the gate. So, you've got all this colliding with each other. And then it's legitimate questions. But again, part of my delay response is, what about my kids? What about my family? If I move into this space and I can't pay for their schooling, and what if we, all the what ifs. And then on the flip side, you start asking the questions, but what if you don't? What's at stake then? Am I just going to do what I've always done? And, none of this, you only live once. Yeah, you only live once. But I really just started to think about time is passing. It's one of the things that we can't get back. And I want to know that when I wake up in the morning, that the work I do, feels, and I'm careful with some of the languaging, but just feels aligned with who I actually am, and B, is making some sort of contribution to the world. And not to say that the marketing stuff wasn't, it definitely was, but this just felt right. And then knowing my personality, there was one of two ways to do this: really slow roll it, right? Oh yeah, keep the marketing agency going, maybe try to sell that business or find an operator but again, I just knew my personality, and that would just be more excuses. So we had to take the Spanish ships approach and just burn it to the ground behind us, burn the bridges and the boats behind us, and say, okay, you have no choice now. And to be completely frank, I don't know what the future looks like. And sometimes that is extremely fearful. Farron and I had to have some real conversations. Hey, when we're looking at our financials year to date last year versus year to date this year, it's a fucking 80%, 88% decrease in revenue. That's not small. And so we're having these conversations, but at the same time, there's just something inside that says, you're doing what you need to be doing. And so don't sweat the small stuff. You'll figure it out as you go. Yeah.
And I think if anybody's listening, that like you can go to get all the content you want, fill your brain up with all the cool ideas, hacks, strategies, whatever you want. At some point in time, you will be faced with the beautiful opportunity of letting your identity go.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most liberating things.
Yeah. One of the hardest things and one of the most liberating.
Yes. Highlight that. So talk to me a little bit about, you've been on this really beautiful journey, and I'm not familiar with 5-MeO because that's the primary compound that you work with.
Yes.
Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the distinction in the experience, the healing, and the opportunity between, let's keep it a little simple for today, because I know you could talk about lots of compounds, ayahuasca, psilocybin, 5-MeO.
Yes. I appreciate that. First, I just want to say, like, obviously I have a bias, and it doesn't mean everybody else has to have the same bias.
Yeah.
It's just my personal experience, obviously.
Mm.
From a distinction standpoint, I think there's a couple of key elements, if you will, that are worth noting. And for the sake of keeping things like super easy, maybe we'll say we'll lump psilocybin and ayahuasca together, in that the experiences are somewhat similar. Somewhat.
Interesting.
Not completely, but somewhat. Well, let's look at it from a couple of perspectives. The leading researchers on psychedelics from the Imperial College of London, so Dr. Christopher Timmerman and Tommaso, they're in our film. They help inform the science behind a lot of it. Dr. Robert Colhart Harris out of San Francisco, also connected with Imperial, has done some of the most research, but the guys out at Imperial have done the most human trial research on psychedelics that are on the planet. In fact, recently they did intravenous ayahuasca for people, keeping them on high dose ayahuasca for 8 hours straight so they could study the brain and what's happening while they're just getting this. Another popular study that just came out was when Dr. Christopher Timmerman took a high level Buddhist Lama who understood meditation and had practiced it their whole life and was believed to be a reincarnate of another Rinpoche Lama, and who understood this place, and then put him through a 5-MeO experience to compare how the brain responded when you were going to the same place via meditation or going through the same place via 5-MeO, both low, medium, and high doses. So like these guys know what they're doing and how they're doing it. I think what's very interesting as considerations are a couple things. Ayahuasca, NN-DMT, psilocybin, even LSD, like all these things in this category. One of the ways to look at it is, what are the visuals that someone can get from the experience? So these ones, highly intense visuals, right? Content is being brought forth either from the outside, which a lot of what ayahuasca experiences, they say, is I went into another hyperdimension. I went into another world. I experienced multiverse type experiences. I've met entities in those things, but highly visual, highly fractal. People can't put to words the patterns and the visions and the colors that they see. Experiencing entities or otherworldly like things is very normal, whether they're spirits or other entities. It's very common in these. In 5-MeO, there are no visuals. In fact, it's often described as a whiteout type experience. So how it's described in such literature is pure presence, blankness. Oftentimes people will call it a whiteout kind of experience. And so it's much more of a felt experience than it is a visual experience. So that's a very clear distinction to consider. Another one is the type of experience. So oftentimes a psilocybin or an ayahuasca experience feels like you are leaving the current state of reality and entering into another. So you're entering into a spiritual plane, a non-physical plane reality, if you will. Oftentimes on those compounds, there is a through line or a story or a journey to be had. You're being walked through personal experiences, through subconscious ideas. Things are coming up. There's almost a path that if you could remember, you recognize, oh, I started here and I moved along to this point. There are feelings of you and external things. So you and spirit and you and all these things that you have kind of encounters with. On the same veil, though, 5-MeO, there is no journey. There is no story to be told. It feels like you are becoming awareness. So that which is aware of all things, you become that. There's no storyline, there's only beingness. And a common language that's used in this space is non-dual. And so it's an interconnectedness, so much so that the world is made up of duality, right? There's me and you, David, and there's me in this light and me in this microphone and all these kind of stuff. And then if you take it a step further into the spiritual kind of context, well, there's me and the spirit, and there's the me and the guides, and there's me and the non-physical realities, but that's still a form of duality. Then the idea of non-duality, meaning there is no observer and observed, there is no subject and no object, there is only that which is in full potentiality. And so there's no distinction between you and God, for example. Your experience is, oh my God, I am everything. That's very interesting. So in a psilocybin ayahuasca experience, the I still exists because the I is having the experience.
Correct.
You can remember the experience. Right. You observe, and so what you observe happens to you. And yes, your identity loosens, like the David Binns portion of him. Not there anymore.
No.
Yeah, but there's still an I having an experience regardless. In the sense of self from a 5-MeO experience is the I completely vanishes. There is no I having an experience. There is just the experience. So there's no experiencer and experience. There's just the experience. It's a feeling of total surrender. And when people use the term like ego dissolution, like this is where true, not just ego dissolution, like all constructs of every form of reality you could ever think of. So everything you think is real in this physical plane, the trees and the clouds and the lights and the physical objects, those gone. But also all forms of non-physical reality, AKA the spirit world or the world beyond this physical reality, that too, gone. And so it's very interesting in that way. So what these kind of like NN, ayahuasca, psilocybin often creates is this beautiful feeling of astonishment and wonder because you're being exposed to this beautiful architecture and these beautiful things that you're observing. Sometimes it could feel chaotic because your brain can't make sense of what's happening. Your emotions can swing. You could feel the lowest of lows and the highest of highs when you're on a journey in a 5-MeO experience. It feels more like overwhelming intensity. There's a very sacred vibe to it. And there's no chaos in the sense where I can't make sense of it. It's because there's nothing to see and nothing to experience. So what's left is this sense of calm and peace and fulfillment, what underlies it. From a bodily sensation experience, oftentimes on the classical psychedelic, you get this strong rush. There's vibrations. You can feel somatics in your body. Sometimes you feel disconnected to your body. It feels distant and strange, but you kind of recognize that it's there. Oftentimes your motor control is limited. Have you ever tried to go pee during a really big, psilocybin experience? Yeah, very difficult.
I'm lucky. I actually never have had to do that, but
okay, I have, and it was interesting. On the body sensation from a 5-MeO experience, it's a great example is they've studied when they took a yogi from the Sanskrit culture, a true yogi, and they believe in the chakra system, of course. And the chakra system fundamentally says that anything going wrong in your life is the result of one or more of your chakras having a blockage of energy. So as long as those energy are clear, then you have direct connection to all things at all times. And the whole yogi practice or yoga in its essence is to clear up the chakras. It doesn't just mean stretching in weird poses. There's a deep practice behind that. Well, they took a yogi through 5-MeO and they said, tell me about your experience. And he said, instantaneous full clearing of the chakras. And he goes, this is something that we try to study and practice for a long, long, long time. And now there's just instantaneous clearing of all the energetic points in the chakra system. So it's like, it's an energetic situation. Oftentimes people, for the lack of a better term, feel like they've died. They've crossed over. Although that physically you haven't, but that's kind of what they experience. And oftentimes 5-MeO can be very somatic in nature. And what I mean by that is, what people don't understand is oftentimes our bodies will hold on to pains, traumas, stresses, etc. There's a book written a long time ago called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
And as long as our ego is fully intact and online, it preserves those stresses because it needs to. It says these stresses and these traumas are part of who I am. If I let them go, who am I? And so it holds on to these things. In a 5-MeO experience, when your ego is completely dissolved and doesn't exist anymore, your body, for the first time in what could have been since you were born, is given the freedom to let go of all these energetic storages or these imprints or these stresses or these patterns or whatever. And so it could be a very somatic experience. Duration, we can talk duration. Psilocybin, ayahuasca, generally a 6 to 8 hour kind of experience. There's a slow come up. Then there's a peak that you hang out with for a while, and then a slow come down, and oftentimes a hangover effect because you've been through so much. And it could be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. A 5-MeO experience, 7 to 21 minutes vaporized. So 7 to 21 minutes, completely done. Your body is completely metabolized the molecule in that time. So you can go home and drive and no problems. It's like it's an in and out thing. I could go on, but I think the one thing that really drew us to this was, and there's an important note for both. So I don't mean this to sound anything else but what it is. Psilocybin, ayahuasca, LSD, MDMA to a certain degree, ketamine to a certain degree, allows us to work on the broken stories of our life.
Yes.
So the misappropriated identities, the stories that are broken that we shouldn't be holding, but we've hung on to and identified, they come in and say, hey, relook at this story. You're seeing it the wrong way. And so when you come out of that experience, you're like, oh man, I've been holding on to this lie for so long, I don't have to anymore. 5-MeO says, not only are we going to dissolve the story, we're going to completely dissolve the storyteller as well. And what that does fundamentally is now, rather than just retelling the story, it allows a user to see themselves as completely separate from all stories. And when you do that, then the gravity of the story loses all of its weight on you. And you can now choose to renegotiate whatever stories you have. But here's the best part. Whatever stories you choose you have, you always maintain the position of being able to see right through them. So we're not replacing stories. We're simply saying no story actually carries any weight on you unless you choose to want to hold this story. And if you do, great. We have to live in this world and have egos and stories that tell us about ourselves. But it separates us from the story. It separates us from the storyteller and brings us to a place of pure awareness. And from that place, what we find is traumas end up losing their weight on us. There's still terrible experiences. They still happened. We're not discounting them whatsoever. But the weight of them dissolve. The identities, we were talking about identity earlier. Some people sometimes mistake to say, well, I'm going to transfer from one identity to another identity. This identity I don't like, but this is what I'm going to be. 5 encourages you to say, you are not any identity. And so you can hold all identities extremely loosely and allow yourself to navigate the world to say, I can, and here's the biggest unlock for me, because as much as all this sounds great, I like the science, not the mystical side of it. The mystical side is beautiful and it's really cool, but I like the science and neuro side of it. The point is, there's such a beautiful unlock that I had to say, when I can make decisions and take actions despite of identity, now it's not tied to anything in particular other than just the joy of living. What that now allowed me to do is free that up. So I know we went long on some of that, but it's very interesting distinctions that 5 can lend to an individual who's able to navigate that space a little bit.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's burning there, that's always in my mind around, I'm very well adversed with psilocybin, have, whether it's microdosing or multiple hero doses guided. Yeah, I think it's really important. And one of my commitments, because I don't facilitate for people, that's not part of my work, but the inner work is part of my world that I work with people on. Oh, I'm going to be a little brash for a second. There's so much spiritual entertainment.
That's right.
Today, right? And we don't need to go down the negative loop, but there's a lot that's put out there.
Yeah.
that has no integrity whatsoever.
Right. And is of no benefit to anybody, frankly.
Correct. And it's been, I'll never forget. I was at Impact Kitchen. It was probably about 2020. And there was this really young girl at the time. She was probably like 24. She lived in my building. And I overheard her talking about all this drama in her life.
Mm.
And she was like, yeah, all these people are doing ayahuasca. I'm just going to go do that. And I was just like, good God, that is not what you do. Like, it's not going to fix you.
No. Yeah.
Every time I've done psilocybin, and I've done anywhere from 4 grams to 7 grams at a time, guided. I've got a deep connection with that medicine, and maybe one day I'll go off and try something else. I really do. And it's beautiful.
Mm.
But given my personal development formal training that I have in that industry, integration is everything in my world.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your perspective on if somebody's starting to see some coincidences or maybe a pull. Like, I'm curious about ayahuasca. Well, David's mentioning psilocybin. Nick's talking about 5-MeO. Where would you suggest somebody go to get themselves appropriately educated and prepared to embark on this? Because this stuff's no joke. Online, it's like everyone's talking about it. It's the cool thing to do. That's not how you approach it, right?
Yeah.
So where would you guide somebody in that sense?
Well, I think there's 2 key elements to that question that I'm so glad that you brought up. One is, how does one prepare, right? Obviously. And what we tell people, so our experience right now is a 4-month container, meaning people mistake any sort of psychedelic experience as, I do the thing and I'm done. Yay, what a cool experience. And then you put a badge on your shoulder and you're like, when's the next one? Ours is a 4-month container, meaning we have a 1-month in-depth protocol to prepare before you can ever step foot and touch the molecule. And what that includes on our end is a combination of very specific nervous system preparation practices. So, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with CO2 breath holds, for example. So a CO2 breath hold is, most people, when you ask them to hold their breath, you breathe in and you hold and you go for as long as you can. A CO2 breath hold is the opposite. So you breathe out until you're completely empty and then you hold. And you do this in a ladder fashion. The first time you try, you could probably only hold for 10 seconds. After that, maybe 15, 20, 30 seconds. And we want to get you to the point where you can hold your breath on empty for 1 minute. Because what that does is it sends signals to your brain that you are dying. It's an automatic response because CO2 buildup in the brain says you are drowning. You need to take a breath. Now, in reality, you don't need to take that breath. But your brain, as a protective mechanism, is like, David, fucking take a breath, bro. You're about to die. This is, now, as odd as it sounds, this is important preparatory work for your nervous system before you go into any molecule work. Because there were times where you are going to feel like you are dying, potentially. The ego part of you, not necessarily dying. With 5.
Yeah, but to your point, though, there's also I've had 2 experiences where once it was in my hip and the other time it was in my back. It was very painful, but there was a lesson there and I worked through it and surrendered, all that. But to your point, you need to be prepared for that. If you think you're just going off to get fixed, and this is what that is not the approach.
No. So we look at it from a multidisciplinary faction. One is, we need to prepare your nervous system for what you're about to embark on, because likely there's nothing you've done in your life, no matter what kind of extreme sports you've tried, that's going to prepare you for what, in our case, 5 will give you an experience of.
So my ultra marathons won't prepare me for this?
Well, you'll feel less tired at the end of it, maybe. But we had so I guess I can't say the name. Someone who's run multi-Ironman, has made a name for themselves as being an Ironman person, and they had a 5 experience, and they're like, oh, wow, okay. And I'm like, you're an ultra endurance athlete, like Jesus. But it is, again, your nervous system is just not prepared for that kind of a thing. So we prepare your nervous system. Secondly, for the 4 weeks leading up to it, you meet with our clinical therapist to make sure you're working through stuff before you ever get there. So if you follow like internal family systems, for example, it's a psychological practice where there are parts of you, call it whatever you want, your ego or whatever, but there's going to be parts of you that are designed to protect you. And going into a molecule-based type of work, those protectors are going to come up and they're going to be like, how dare you? We are not doing this. Fuck this. And so instead of the allowing, or what some people call surrender, you're fighting your way through this whole thing. That, my friends, is not a pleasant experience when you're trying to fight your way through one of these things. And so you meet with our clinical therapist to do a bunch of parts work prior to actually having an experience. You meet with one of our Buddhist practitioners who walk you through what's known as a nature of mind practice. And so a nature of mind practice is, can you be comfortable when all of reality dissolves before you? Because that's likely going to happen in a 5 experience, but you could actually practice that in meditation, a version of meditation called nature of mind practice before that. So it's a good opportunity for you to really do an inventory of your life, to say, why am I doing this? What do I want to get? Like, what is calling me towards this? And then adjusting your life accordingly. I mean, we tell people, if you're not prepared to let go of dirty foods and start exercising and reducing caffeine up to 2 weeks before, these are just normal things. But if you can't situate your life to sleep 8 hours a night leading up to this experience, if you can't drop coffee in the mornings for at least 2 weeks prior to this, if you can't sweat for 20 minutes a day and discipline yourself to, and I don't care how you sweat, just go out and do something. If you can't do those basic things, do not ever sign up for something like this.
Yep.
Because it's potentially going to do way more harm than good, right? So we have all that then we have the experience, which is held in a very specific container. And then we have a 3-month integrative process where you continue to work with our clinical therapist, who's very well versed in 5-MeO and particularly how one's nervous system responds to that. You are working with, again, our nature of mind practitioner. We're fortunate enough now to, because of our work in the film, to have one of the leading lamas in Nepal, a Rinpoche, which is the highest level lama you can get, to also coach you on mind work post the experience. And so you're having one-on-one weekly calls with our experts to really help you integrate this experience on top of all the nervous system stuff that we offer.
That's beautiful.
So I say all that to tell people that if you are considering this, David, you nailed it. Integration is not something you do after the experience. Integration is the experience. It just so happens to, you lead with prep, then you have an experience, and then you do it is one thing. You cannot separate it.
So I just want
for people to recognize that if you're not willing to do that, all you're doing is participating in spiritual masturbation that's not going to benefit anybody at any time.
1,000%. So it's so important because we can all go do an experience.
Sure.
But the biggest differentiating factor between people having the quality of life that they really desire from the experience, but also the results, I believe, purely comes down to integration.
I want to be careful how I say this because, and again, not every facilitator is also great at leading integration. And that's not their fault. They're great facilitators. But if you're going to see a facilitator who doesn't have an integration model, then you need to take it upon yourself to create an integration model or associate with. There's many organizations out there who all they do is help you integrate. So go to them. I'm not going to say every facilitator in the world should also hold 4 or 5 month containers. Some people, like if you look in especially plant-based stuff where it is cultural, and that's another thing I really appreciate about 5-MeO, is that there's no cultural history to it, oddly enough. And I can get into all that data as well. But if you're having a psilocybin experience, if you're going to have an ayahuasca-like experience, you've got to keep in mind that some people are just called to be shamans, if you will, and deliver this. And again, even in the ayahuasca culture, integration is built into their lifestyle. You're part of the tribe, and the tribe executes and operates on a certain way before, during, and after. The North American comes and says, I'm going to live with the tribe for 3 days and drink this brew 4 times and go back to North America. It's not the tribe's obligation to help
No.
you integrate, but you should pull up your pants and be an adult and say, well, if that's how they do it, I've got to figure out ways that I can integrate in my own way. But the point I'm trying to make is anybody, and I don't know who's to blame, no one's really to blame, but either the participant who's looking for the experience or the people who are facilitating the experience, or maybe it's all of us. You can never see an experience like this in two lights. One, that it'll fix everything. No, it's going to stir a whole bunch of stuff up, and then it's up to you to then work out those fixes, number one. And number two, if you don't plan to be serious about your life and actually taking the work and what was done and doing what you need to do, however that might be, please don't bother with the experience, because it's going to be more harm than good on some level. And when I say more harm, I don't mean you're going to have a bad trip or whatever. But the danger in this work that I've noticed is that if you're not careful, it reinforces a seeker mentality. And some people wear that as a badge of honor to say, I'm a forever seeker. Let's look at all the ancient scripts. Even the Bible, if you follow it, says, seek and you shall what? Find. Not seek forever and you will never find. It's an idea that you go towards something to find what you need to find and to work it out. And I know people who are doubly termed here as psychonauts, people who go from one experience to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. They're just seeking. And I ask them all the time, why again? Why the fourth time this year? And they're like, I haven't found yet. I'm like, friend, can I tell you the truth? You will never find if that's the mentality, right? Yep. Because thinking that the experience in itself, without the integrative aspects and without anything, is just going to somehow magically fix everything. So I think there's just some mindsets that need to be shifted around this type of work. And I don't believe this 100%, but it's what I would say publicly as much as I can to try to change the paradigm of it. My hope is that whatever molecule I end up working with, but my hope is that when you have the experience, you almost go into it with a one and done mentality. This is the first and the last and the only experience I will ever have. Now, does that mean you should? No, I've had multiple experiences. David, I know you've had multiple experiences. So it's not that it is one and done. It could open you up, but I'm sure as hell believe, and I don't want to make any assumptions, that David, you won't do your next experience until you work through all those notes and everything in that notepad is fully integrated into your life. And then maybe
you're exactly right. You are exactly right. You brought that up because you do want to treat it, if you're listening to this, you do want to treat it as one and done, because the intention that you bring to the ceremony,
right,
or the experience and who you are facilitated by is critical.
Yeah.
Critical. And then have an integration. That is so important. So if somebody's curiosity is getting piqued a little bit more, where would you direct them in this day and age right now? You know, the world's a very complicated place. There's lots online. There's this person saying ayahuasca is the way. This person saying this is the way. And that's, you know, I get that. You do that. I certainly lead my work this way. I'm very agnostic and would direct people based off their individual needs.
Right.
But I think that's maybe the question. What would highlight for you in what someone's saying to say, you know what, 5-MeO, that's something that you should explore, or I don't want to use the word should, would be worthwhile exploring?
Yeah. So during our intake interview process, and sometimes people say this by mistake, and if they say it by mistake, I'm okay with it. But if it seems like what I'm evaluating for is, we ask it in a bunch of different ways, but why are you wanting this experience? And for some, it's because what I call tantalized trauma. And all that means is they are so, and look, I have to be careful when I say stuff like this. I am trauma informed. I believe that we should respect and honor those who've had difficult experiences, for sure. I'm not making light of any of that. But sometimes some of the narratives have gone so far that my mom looked at me the wrong way when I was 14 and now I hate all human beings. So there's What I'm trying to say is, if you are ready, if your narrative is overly trauma informed, meaning everything is trauma and I'll never get over it, I'm just looking for little bites to climb a little bit higher, 5-MeO is probably not the experience for you. There's probably some other work you can and should do, molecules or not, to work through that initial stuff before you get into a stable state. That's actually an important point. 5 is not to take someone from massively destabilized to stable. How we approach the work is taking someone who is stable, who's looking for the next unlock. That's a much more healthier approach, at least for 5. I can't say for other things, but at least for 5, that's a key element. If I am interviewing someone and I ask them, when was the last kind of psychedelic experience you've had? And they say something like 2 months ago, you're disqualified. It's not happening. Because you're just telling me you read somewhere that 5 is the next level for you, and you working your way up your psychedelic ladder or whatever the heck it is, and you just want that badge. Like that's not going to happen either. But fortunately, the interesting thing, I think, that from our perspective, and again, that's another key point. It's asking yourself, what do you want? Like, what do you really want? And then from there, you can ask, who is best apt to provide that for me? You want to talk to people and see people who've had other experiences, that sort of thing. For us, and I think this is just by nature of the kind of life that we've lived and where we've come from, I'd say 85% of the people who come see us, one, have never done a psychedelic experience in their life before. Some have casual college recreational. Oh, I remember.
Sure, that doesn't count
as a kid. But 85% of the people who come to us, have never done a psychedelic before. I find that fascinating. Secondly, most of them have spent untold amounts of hours in some form of personal development work, and they feel like they've hit a ceiling. They're like, okay, I've done it. There's only so many more conferences I can go to and books I can read. I need to get past this thing. Thirdly, they are, we described this a little bit earlier in the conversation. There is what we would call like an inner knock inside. So success is relevant. They've experienced some level of success. It's not like they're dragging their feet through life and no, success is good. Life is good. There's all this stuff happening, but there is that little something, that knock that if they're quiet enough to listen to it, saying, oh, there is more if you're willing to explore. You don't have to. If you're willing to explore, there's more. So for us, we find that usually it's someone who would identify themselves as a high performer, someone who has done a lot of work already on themselves, but are looking for someone who is stable. And I know we're all not fully stable, but not really destabilizing, looking for a stabilizing source. And then someone who just feels that little inner knock, that calling to recognize there's an unlock somewhere that they can't pinpoint. Those are worthwhile considerations to see if this might be an exploration route for you. Outside of that, I think, again, and we kind of shared it before, how about we all just start with like doing the basics of taking care of ourselves? Like, before you should ever consider a big psychedelic experience, go to bed early, get 8 hours of sleep or 7 hours of sleep, like take care of yourself, eat healthy, move your body, like do the basic 101 self-care, because just that is going to start aligning your nervous system to be better and more regulated.
Yep.
And then when you're ready to do some deeper work, then there are some options to go beyond that. But for someone to say, I don't care about myself, I've never taken care of myself, I never plan to, but I want to go eat some mushrooms and have the world and the universe unlocked before me. I mean, there's a bit of a disconnect between intention and actuality there.
Yeah, it's kind of two final questions. Like,
which, by the way, I'm so grateful that we can have this conversation, David. Thank you for jamming with us and having.
It's funny how our conversations have changed over the years. Before it was like, hey, Nick, can you help me with Facebook ads? Yeah, I learned this. And
and I'm like, David, can I buy a piece of real estate? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Can we sell this property? And now we're talking about 5-MeO. That's amazing. What's the one thing you want if you are unfiltered and looking at the modern spiritual movement, human potential movement, and personal development movement, what's the one thing you want to say to the industry, unfiltered?
Ooh. So it's funny that you bring this up because, well, I'll just say this: stop improving. Don't improve. And I say that part of me doesn't want to explain it and just let it sit with people and let people get mad and try to figure out what the fuck does he mean? Why is he saying that? That doesn't make sense. Prove it. The other part of me is like,
who are you to tell me not to improve?
I want an explanation, and part of me is like, should we explain or should we just let some people with this? I'll lob it out in the best way I can without providing too much explanation, but with enough for hopefully to like ruminate in you as it did for me. Mm-hmm. And when I say you, I mean the listener. Personal development, high performance, in essence is so pure because it drives us forward to contribution. It drives us forward to be the best version of ourselves. It drives us forward to show up in the world as fully as we can. And in the right container, it's beautiful and it's contributive and it helps. But in the wrong container, it is no different than any other addiction that exists on the planet. It stems from the fundamental belief that I am not enough. And because I am not enough, I need to seek out things that will make me better. That in itself is pure. However, what ends up happening is with every new upgrade and every new advancement and every new biohack and every new affirmation and every new visualization, in theory, it's supposed to settle you to the point of, oh, I am enough, but it does the opposite. It re-perpetuates and reinforces the message that I am not enough. And what ends up happening is this endless, perpetual loop of living from the position that I am not enough, so I need to improve. I need to be made better. I need to be more spiritual. I need to do all these things. And here's what I've kind of come to learn from, and this was literally from my first 5 experience, but people can come to this realization however they do, is those pursuits of improvement are beautiful when they come from the place of the recognition that I am enough. Then pursue, then go, then do, then take the actions. But my fundamental understanding, at least as it stands today, is that every form of personal human suffering is the result of multiple things. One, the result of this understanding of separation, which is why I like 5, because 5 brings us into a non-dual experience, because most human suffering is based on duality. And fundamentally, it's I am separated from creation or creator. I'm separate from that which all is. So I'm trying to go through life on my own, and David is different from me. And sometimes that means he could be a friend, but sometimes that means he could be a foe. So I've got to protect myself against him saying some mean things again. And we go through life feeling like everybody is other. And if we feel like everybody is other, then we're on this constant fight or flight or protective mechanism. So this feeling of separation is what actually causes or is the root of most personal suffering, which then latches onto this idea that I am who I think I am. So this idea of self, the construct of self, we think I am self. A lot of ancient traditions will tell us that self is actually an object no different than the microphone I'm speaking into and the light that I'm looking at and the camera that I'm looking at. I can look at the camera and say, well, I'm not that camera. Of course I'm not that camera. That camera's there and I'm over here. But then when we say, or we look at our thoughts or we look at our construction of ourself, this idea of self, we say, well, I'm myself. Of course I'm myself. No. Yourself is an idea. And here's a great point of this. There are 8 billion versions of Nicholas Kusmich. What I mean by that is every single person in this planet who looks at me never actually sees me. They see their version of me. That's why I have a good relationship with David, but I might not have a good relationship with someone else because they're talking to the same person, but they have their own versions of me. Hell, I have my own version of myself. So if there are 8 billion different versions of self, then what is self? Is it actually a thing, or is it a concept or a construct of ideas that are coming together? And so if that's the case, then a lot of our suffering is connected to the version of self we think we are. This identity that may not be true at all, but we're like, I'm this person, I operate in this way, I have these labels, and as a result, I'm separate, so on and so forth. So there's that element. So if everyone could wake up to the reality that we are not the self we think we are, and that we are not the identities that we carry around, and we're not connected to our thoughts and our emotions and these feelings. These are things we experience, but we aren't those things. Then we can be free, molecular, not for goodness sakes. If we can really understand that, we can be free from all the stories that are tying us down, and we can be free from the perpetual underlying current that says, I am not enough. And we can then function in this world from a perspective of, I am enough. And that simple shift then can change our output and our advocacy for the world and what we do and how we do it and how we treat other people when we realize that we are one interconnected thing, like bound in love. That can change things.
Profoundly.
Yeah.
I'm just present to the work that you're doing. I'm present to the work that I do with people, and that's what it all comes back to.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to do is, show people that, you and I and other people on the podcast, people that I work with, like, they've got some stuff figured out, and we never have it all figured out. I'm very open with my clients about what I'm working through with Adele, like different things. Like, part of my, you're going to correct, your marketing brain's going to correct me here. Like, part of the theme around here is that authenticity is the currency of the future. And I learned that from a very good friend of mine, Sasha Lala, 15 years ago. I'm going to ask you a really vulnerable question, because as leaders in the space of serving others, one, people often think we have it all together. I don't. You're building a new venture. That comes with challenges. But what's one thing that you need right now and that you're working on right now for yourself?
I'll try to answer both. The one thing I'm working on myself is I saw my father have his first heart attack when I was 4. And that deeply affected me because at the time of a 4-year-old, it communicated to me that the universe is a harsh place to live in. And then as the years passed, my father got more and more sick, and I was an only child, and I had to be the primary breadwinner for my family when I was 16 or 17. And then I lost my father, and I went through life with a fundamental belief that the world is out to get me on some level, that it's not fair, that everything is going to be difficult. And so I turned on hard mode in my life. And as a result of that, I also carried a belief that if I can control things, then I can't be hurt. But if I can't control things, then I'm vulnerable to be hurt. And what that ended up operating as of me being essentially OCD in everything that I do. And where that mattered the most was when I got married and I had children. Like, I wanted my kids to be in order. I wanted everything to be right. And it wasn't because I cared about if they were neat and tidy. It was because if it wasn't in order, that meant the world was chaos. And if the world was chaos, then it was out to get me. And so I had this built-in innate nervous system response to anything that was out of order. Let me tell you, friends, having kids, everything's out of order. So early on, and continuing to this day, I am working through the state of just allowing everything to be as is. And particularly with my kids and my family, because early on, I found myself snappy and frustrated and, come on, just clean up after yourself. I asked you 4 times, or I did this and I did that, or whatever it be.
Yeah.
And I'd started to put blame on my family. You don't value what I value, and you don't respect my desires. And, anyways, it's all stuff that I'm working with. But what I am working with as I go through, especially this transition that I'm in right now, is it really challenges the notion of, have you overcome that belief that the world is inherently dangerous? And as I transition with negotiating contracts and working with people and figuring out what my next play is and doing these things, it's coming up. Are you really free of that, or are you still working through some of that? That's something I'm working through now. I think my greatest need is, well, it's what we're doing now. Like, I wish if more and more people could be privy to hear conversations like this, especially in a social media world where everybody and their mother is a creator making content about just about anything because they chat GPT'd something on one morning and they're like, oh, I'm going to read this script from AI and now I'm an expert in such and such. And I mean, it's a noisy world out there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, who knows, like, some of the stuff that's out there, I feel like, is perpetuating the very problem that we're trying to stand against. And so, the need is, with the film coming out and the conversations that we're having here, is, can we figure out ways to continue to spread the message, hopefully resonates with enough people that can get them aligned with living potentially a different way. I will never turn down a request from someone saying, how can I help you spread some of that news that you're discussing and talking about? That would be kind of a need on where we are today.
That's beautiful. I don't think this will be the only podcast that we're going to record. This is the first conversation I've had with you where I've actually feel like I've gotten to know you, and I bet you're having the same experience with me.
Yeah.
I just put that because
it's
before
crazy that it's been 11 years.
Right? It's just fascinating. So, you've got some really exciting stuff going on right now. Where can people learn about the documentary? Where can people learn about what you're doing, and what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I love that. And I appreciate you asking. The movie's called Unbecoming, appropriately titled, because we're taking a stand of the perpetual message of you have to become more. And what if the key to life is to unbecome all that you are not? And so that's the basis of the film. Everything about that film, depending on when you're watching this or seeing it, would be at unbecoming.movie. Our work with 5MEO is found at Awaken with 5, the number 5. So awakenwith5.com. That'll share a bunch of stuff there. I've taken up to writing, oddly enough. And we put out a newsletter every single week. It's free, but it's my ramblings and thoughts around kind of these ideas in the most practical neuroscience-based way as possible. That's free for anybody. And if you kind of just want to follow along the content-wise and journey-wise, there's information there that can allow you to kind of enroll in that and get caught up to everything that I'm doing. That's probably the 3 best ways for now. Oh, and social media, fortunately, I'm the only Nicholas Kusmich on the planet, thankfully. So
never found another one.
Yeah, it's hard to find. It's hard to miss me. As long as you can spell the last name correctly, you can find me. So I'm at a phase in my life right now where I'm really just looking to connect with great people who are aligned with the message. And so if you reach out on any other platforms, it'll be me and not someone else responding. So
yeah, that's amazing. Well, look, man, it was incredible to have you on today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was super valuable for me, and I know it was super valuable for other people looking to either expand their work around psychedelics and maybe 5MEO, or if they're just starting their journey. So thanks so much for being here, man.